President Lee Jae-myung has highlighted the need for a comprehensive strategy to transform South Korea's tourism industry into a tangible growth engine. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello, welcome to Friday's edition of Press Perspective. It's February 27th here in Seoul, and I'm Sun-hee. So the question now is how does South Korea encourage more foreign travelers to visit the country and ensure that their time here is fun and rewarding and that they will return in the near future? To answer this daunting question and many more like it, I have freelance journalist Raphael Rashid here in the studio. Raphael, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with us. Colin, it's great to have you here.
Glad to be here, Sun-hee.
Raphael, let's start with you. Let's begin perhaps with a recap of the recent tourism strategy meeting held at the presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae earlier this week and its relevance, of course.
Sure. So President Lee Jae-myung chaired National Tourism Strategy meeting at the Blue House on Wednesday. And this marked the first time a sitting president actually hosts this kind of gathering since, I believe, 2019. This meeting brought together key ministers alongside private sector figures, including Lee Boo-jin, who's the CEO, of course, of Hotel Shilla and chair of the Visit Korea Committee. And then there was also Alberto Mondi from the Italian Chamber of Commerce. The government announced at this meeting that it's essentially bringing forward its target of attracting, I think it's 30 million foreign tourists, visitors by 2029, a year earlier than originally planned. And, you know, if we look at the figures, just this year alone, they're aiming for 23 million visitors. So it's obviously very ambitious. I mean, we have to think that just last year, we already had quite a substantial amount of tourists coming to the country. I think it was 18.94 roughly. So definitely big ambitions. At this meeting, of course, there were several plans that were unveiled. On the visa front, there was, they're going to look into, for example, including Indonesia to have a kind of pilot program to grant visa-free access to tourists with in group tourists essentially. And then the government also is looking to introduce a 5-year multi-visa entry for Chinese and Southeast Asian tourists who have previously visited Korea. There are also several other visa categories that they're thinking about. Also, maybe there will also be automated those immigration kiosks at the airport that were only available for, I think it was 19 or 20 countries, but that will be expanded to the European Union countries. So I think when we look at all of this, there really seems to be a push to revitalize, especially regional tourism. Airlines establishing new international routes to regional airports. They will be receiving some reduced fees for using those facilities, and cruise terminals will also be operating 24 hours a day, and they will be starting off that kind of thing in the port of Busan. So, you know, to wrap up, when we look at what President Lee emphasized, he said that, you know, K-culture's global appeal needs to translate into people actually coming here and wanting to visit. And even Lee Boo-jin echoed this, saying that Korea needs to become a wonderful place where foreigners want to live in, just like Koreans, and not just visit.
Right. All this being said then, Colin, how do you explain the drive behind the Lee Jae-myung administration's determination to transform our tourism industry into a growth engine?
Yes, as Raphael mentioned, this idea of K-culture, the phenomenon of so-called K-culture being better known around the world more widely and more appreciated than ever before. It makes good business sense. You know, you want to cash in on that, or let's say capitalize on that. It's a genuine interest, and I think more foreigners than ever, we could plausibly say, want to visit South Korea. So it makes sense to make it easier for them, or to sort of visibly get the doors open and to just speed the not necessarily speed, but sort of smooth the process for a lot of visitors who might want to, prospective visitors who say, you know, oh, Korea, this place seems, it's like the happening country. It's interesting. I like Korean food, dramas, film. Let's go see the real thing. You know, they might not necessarily know what they're going to do when they get here, or they know how to get here, but not necessarily the logistics when they arrive. So there are, in the minds of many, and we can forget this easily as foreigners who live here, there are psychological boundaries, not necessarily knowing how they're going to navigate the place in both sort of literal and metaphorical ways when they get here. So you can see the motivation, and you can kind of see how it could work as well. It doesn't seem like a pie in the sky type vision, type plan. It is very ambitious to get up to 30 million foreign tourists by 2030. I do think Lee Jae-myung is to be commended for announcing a goal that extends beyond his presidency, beyond his term, which is not usually the case with presidents here. But also, as a foreigner who lives here, or really as anyone who lives here, you do feel some degree of concern about the number of tourists increasing that much in not that long a span of time. One of the things one of the qualities I've always valued about South Korea is its relative lack of a large tourist culture compared to a country like even Japan, or to say nothing of Thailand, for example, or looking farther afield, France. You know, these are countries where the tourism is an inescapable factor at this point of life there, whereas it has not been in South Korea, even in Seoul, if you stay out of certain parts of town during certain seasons. And I do wonder, you know, thinking of my favorite parts of Seoul or my favorite parts of Korea outside Seoul, if 10 million more foreigners descending upon them is really something to be anticipated rather than feared. But again, the business logic is, I suppose, infallible. I do wonder if it'll turn into yet another way that South Korea becomes dependent upon the whims and interests of the world abroad, but that's a subject for another day.
It is, for sure. Meanwhile, Raphael, findings show that 80% of all foreign travelers to South Korea are centered here in capital Seoul. Why do you suppose is this the case?
Sure, I think this concentration stems from several factors. I think primarily, first and foremost, infrastructure is a reality. People will be coming to South Korea mainly through Incheon International Airport, and this serves as the primary gateway for when tourists come in this country. And of course, while regional airports do exist in Korea, they lack the density, I think, for major international routes that would allow these tourists to essentially bypass Seoul entirely and just focus on those areas. So I think naturally when people come to Korea, they will gravitate towards the place where they land. I think also K-culture's global appeal is inherently Seoul-centric. So all of these hot destinations that foreign tourists think of when they come to Korea, maybe they're drawn by K-pop or K-drama filming locations, and a lot of these I think are in Seoul or in Seoul's surrounding areas. If we talk about maybe the BTS effect or Korean barbecue in trendy neighborhoods or palace tours in Gyeongbokgung, again, those are all in and near and around Seoul and the capital area. But I think there are also some structural issues as well. I wouldn't say all, but I think a lot of regional destinations have struggled to develop distinctive identities and narratives that would give foreign tourists compelling reasons to go to those places, going out of the capital area. And there are several industry analyses about this that suggest that many of these provinces and other places have focused on replicating similar infrastructure and experiences. So we may have like zip lines or suspension bridges or these gondolas that we see, basically generic facilities that are replicated around the country rather than cultivating kind of a unique local culture or content narratives that people will feel compelled to go to that specific place for that specific reason. So again, researchers call this a so-called perception gap. Foreign visitors often feel that once they've experienced Seoul, that they've essentially experienced the entire country. So I think this concentration on Seoul, it feeds on itself. The more tourism investments go into these places, the more developed they become, and there might be some disparity or inequality when it comes to other places that might not have such resources. So I think it's maybe a bit of a vicious cycle. But one thing I guess I would want to point out is I don't think this is unique necessarily to South Korea. Many countries do face this kind of capital region concentration where people will obviously gravitate to. And I think it's admirable in a way that President Lee has, talked about this and believes that this is a challenge that needs to be addressed.
Right. Raphael, it almost sounds as if you were a fly on the wall at the meeting on Wednesday, because those are some of the concerns raised by the president and his officials. That being said, if you were at the meeting, Colin, what would you propose to promote tourism beyond the capital region?
Well, there are technical improvements one can suggest, a variety of them. For example, the Korail Tourist Pass exists, which again, not many foreigners actually know. Awareness can be a problem, but its existence is one thing, and the sort of capacity, flexibility of it is quite another. I think the longest period you can buy it for is 5 days, which is a far cry from, say, a Eurail pass. You wonder, why isn't there a month? Why can't you buy a month and a half, 2 months? Surely if somebody really wants to get outside Seoul, they want to spend some time in the country, and you can easily spend that much time traveling from place to place within South Korea. If you so desire, that's a minority among travelers, but there are such people who really want to get to know the country, and I think are perhaps not aware of their options. But like many policy discussions of this kind, I think it is occurring a bit too far downstream of the actual problem, which Raphael alluded to, which is the status of everywhere outside Seoul. Within Korea, among Koreans, there's this word, as we know, jibang, which means region, technically, but means not Seoul. You're in Seoul or the jibang, and everybody knows what connotations the word jibang comes with when you refer to a place that way. And so I think really foreigners who come to Korea for the first time, even if they're not that knowledgeable about Korean culture, they sense that everything outside Seoul is not prioritized or really looked up to by Seoulites or even Koreans outside Seoul. So making other regions more robust in and of themselves would have to be the way you go about this in a more enduring manner. I think of other countries like Japan, which has had a huge tourist boom in recent years. And one of the places that always gets hit hard by tourism, for good or ill, is Kyoto. Not Tokyo, which of course has its own, it's a huge tourist hub, but Kyoto is the next one, I believe. And it's not near Tokyo. You have to book a train ticket and get there. But it's a place where, yes, foreigners think of it as the city where you go to see the real classical Japan, which is inaccessible elsewhere. But it's not just that, it's also a genuine economic center, sub-center in the country. Nintendo is headquartered there. Several other international companies are. It has a reason to exist, even within the Japanese economy. It's not a tourist spot by itself. And so converting a lot of regions of Korea, which themselves could be falling on hard times now, with tourist infrastructure, I don't think it's not a solution that has a lot of staying power. The first step is to actually is to find ways to remove the taint of jibang, I would say, but that's a much longer term project. Even 2030 is a very short deadline to be doing that.
Right. Moving forward, Raphael, one day before the tourism strategy meeting at Cheong Wa Dae, the Culture Ministry spoke to members of the media, and it claimed it was going to take stern action against price fixing, if you will, by businesses in the tourism industry. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Sure. So this briefing laid out fairly aggressive measures to tackle what's become persistent reputational problems. Officials noted that the majority of complaints filed with the Tourism Complaint Centre come from foreign visitors, with unfair taxi fares topping the list, followed by accommodation issues, particularly when it comes to accommodation near big events, when these events happen. And of course, the scale of the problem, I think, has become quite visible, especially these days with the BTS world tour kicking off soon. After the world tour was announced, prices, for example, in Busan during the dates or the weekend of the concert, they surged considerably, and the Fair Trade Commission surveyed, I think it was 135 properties, and found that the average rate for these places went up 2.4 times during the weekend of the concert. And I think some motels originally priced at 100,000 went up to 750,000 won. We've also seen the same problem happening in Seoul, again, near the concert dates. There's also the issue of unilateral cancellation of your hotel. So you've booked it, it's been confirmed, and suddenly the hotel will say, sorry, your reservation has been cancelled due to some, I don't know, renovation. What they do is then they suddenly list the property again at a much higher price. So the government's response, they're looking to require accommodation providers to declare their rates in advance for peak seasons as well, off-peak season and special events. And properties that don't display prices or exceed their posted rates will face immediate suspension, and repeated offenders could even see their businesses shut down entirely. We also have for taxis, they're strengthening this 3-strike system. Drivers caught overcharging will face an immediate 30-day license suspension on the first offence, potentially leading to permanent revocation. We also have the street vendor issue. I mean, this has gone viral, at least on my social media feeds, where you see certain street vendors charging one price for foreign tourists and charging a cheaper price for the Koreans, or even giving half the amount. And unfortunately, this issue has gone viral on social media, and people are well aware of certain traditional markets to apparently avoid, and in turn that is affecting all the other kind of merchants who are being reasonable and charging reasonable prices for everyone. It basically destroys the experience for everyone else. So the government wants these street vendors to prevent this kind of dual pricing system, and ask that the vendors put out their prices clearly labeled for everyone to see. So officials have acknowledged that legislative revisions will be needed. They'll have to fast track these probably in the first half of this year, so that they can take effect later on in the year when there are bigger events happening.
Right, especially as you mentioned, this year we're aiming to attract over 20 million tourists to the country. Now, all these actions, Colin, essentially they're aimed at boosting foreign travel to South Korea, and also to ensure a series perhaps of repeat travels to the country. That being said, Colin, generally speaking, what would encourage a foreign traveler to South Korea to return, to come back for another visit?
Yes, I think about this because I know a few foreigners who have come back over and over again over the years, and they find something here they like, and whether or not they can speak Korean or they even know their way around that well, they find something compelling here or feel it here and keep coming back. That's a minority. Most, I suspect, come, especially if it's out of an interest in sort of current the Korean cultural profile, you could say. Currently out there. They come and they feel like they've seen it, and maybe I'll come back. They probably don't. In one sense, I think, because we could say the packaged tourist experience is almost, it feels too complete. For some of them, they come and they go to Gyeongbokgung and wear the hanbok, and they go to Gwangjang Shijang, and they go to the DMZ, and they take the Gangnam K-pop tour or whatever it might be. And they kind of run out of options that are legible to them. They know that even Seoul alone is a huge city. There's a lot out there, but it's hard to identify what else they could do that would enrich their own experience. And so they somehow, after just a few days, maybe a week, they feel like, well, I guess I've seen Korea. I mean, like not just Seoul, but they feel like they've seen the whole of Korea that they can access, or that they have any sense exists. And so I think, in some sense, yes, the Korea presented to foreigners is too limited. And that's something I've been complaining about for a long time. But also I've been complaining about the fact that tourists often don't make the effort to sort of meet Korea halfway either. They do expect everything to be laid out for them, preferably in their own language. And past a certain point, that's not a realistic expectation. So, it's going to be hard to get to 30 million if you sort of ask people to get at least some grasp on the Korean language. But I think it's not unreasonable to have that expectation.
Right. Raphael, the simple rule of thumb, if you will, is that tourist satisfaction will most likely boost repeat visitation. Personally, what for you would define a satisfying foreign visit? And secondly, how can South Korea seek to encourage travelers to return to the country?
Sure. I think for me, the most satisfying visits in any country or place I visit, I think it's the experience of feeling that it's effortless but also authentic. I think those are really important for me. I want to feel like I'm discovering something new, not just ticking the boxes of the places that have been listed on Instagram that I must visit, or the restaurants that are claimed to be the top restaurants, top 10 on list. I think those best trips are the ones where you kind of stumble upon a neighborhood restaurant because maybe you got lost, and then you have an impromptu experience and maybe even interact with locals in that way. So I do believe that also the kind of practical ease, of course, is important. Being able to navigate in a place without feeling too frustrated. Of course, maybe you might not speak the language, but at least ease of getting around, infrastructure. And I think for Korea specifically, there's enormous potential when it comes to building around what's already working in this country. Again, public transport is remarkably efficient. The food culture, I think, is very accessible for foreign tourists. Also, these days a lot is actually in English these days, and we can all, of course, use certain translation applications if not. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential. But coming back to some of the points that we've discussed today, I think ultimately Korea should, be aiming for visitors to be leaving the country and feel like they've just scratched the surface and want something to come back to every time and feel like they can discover something completely new and different when they next come back to Korea.
I feel like it's more easier said than done, right?
Exactly.
Yes. But it's not our job to come up with the plans. So hopefully they're listening to us and they'll come up with a plan in the near future. All right, Raphael, as always, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Colin, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, that ends our talk today. Thank you for watching. We return same time next Tuesday after the long weekend.